What if I told you Skid Row didn't just lose their front man, they erased him with a dial tone? Skid Row had the hits, the attitude, the front man from hell until one call blew the whole thing up in front of somebody's family. Here's how that fire started and why they still won't put it out.
Like, subscribe, thank you.
New Jersey, 1985. Rachel Bolin and Snake Sabo were building something loud, fast, and furious. Their childhood friends, warehouse kids with guitars and fire in their eyes. The lineup clicked into place piece by piece. Scotty Hill plugged in October 86, bringing the second guitar that cut like shrapnel. And then came the wild card. 1987, a wedding gig of all places. That's where they found him, Sebastian Bach. 6 foot something, blonde, unhinged. A scream that could peel the paint off a Cadillac. He wasn't just the front man, he was the full-on explosion. By the time drummer Rob Affuso locked in behind the kit, it was done. This was the band. The one that could torch arenas, flip the hair metal script, and eventually violently turn on itself. So the fuse was lit in 89 and it wasn't subtle. Skid Row's self-titled debut didn't just arrive, it torched the friggin' place. 5 million copies gone. One record, and suddenly 5 New Jersey punks were standing on top of the world, staring down coliseums they used to sneak past just to scalp tickets. There's no ramp up or slow burn, just a rocket blast straight out of the clubs and into the chaos. 18 in Life turned prison tragedy into platinum. I Remember You ripped hearts wide open in mall parking lots. Youth Gone Wild hit like a brick through every guidance counselor's window. MTV was theirs. The airwaves were theirs. But so was the weight of it all. Too much, too fast, on shoulders that hadn't even finished growing. And the higher they soared, the thinner that air got. On stage, Skid Row was a riot set to music. The shows burned with that kind of intensity that you couldn't fake. Sebastian Bach stalking the stage like a man possessed, scaling PA towers, hurling himself into the crowd, spitting venom and tenderness in the same breath. And that voice was just friggin' incredible. In 1 second he's breaking the rafters, the next he's peeling paint with a scream. Fans watched Skid Row, but they also got swallowed by that band. And the fire didn't fade, it just flared hotter. In 91, Slave to the Grind dropped like a hammer. Darker, louder, way more aggressive than the debut, and still it bulldozed its way to #1 on Billboard. An album that heavy, debuting at the top, nobody would have thunk it, but it really cracked things wide open. And the band had the numbers, the fury, and the bite to back it up. And the pressure, still climbing. With fame came fallout. Sebastian Bach made sure none of it came quietly. He was the embodiment of Youth Gone Wild, a walking headline, equal parts swagger and meltdown. But no moment really captured all the insanity like December 27, 1989, Springfield, Massachusetts, opening for Aerosmith, packed house. Somebody from the crowd chucks a bottle, he hits Bach square, he snaps, doesn't hesitate, whips the bottle right back into the audience, and it connects. Not with the original thrower, but a female fan. And then, as if scripted by a demon with a flair for theater, he dives into the crowd, fists flying. Security ends up dragging him out. Cops drag him into jail, and he walks out with 3 years probation. It was all there in one ugly moment. Raw power, no filter, no brake pedal. That rage and recklessness and the fallout that would follow him like a curse. And Skid Row was living in it. The road turned into a battleground. Endless nights blurred by booze and groupies, disruption, and hell, even destruction. Hotels became war zones. Pranks escalated into chaos. Rules were civilians. And hell, there were even 4 civilians. Skid Row was on a tear and nothing slowed them down. It was just image, lifestyle. The kind that burns hot, fast, and leaves a trail. Substance use? A given. Nobody wrote it down, but it didn't need to be. The era ran on excess, and Skid Row guzzled every drop. And Sebastian would later talk about the toll that it was taking, the spirals and the scars. But back then, all throttle, no brakes. But the crazy didn't always stay fun. At some point in the late 80s or early 90s, a photo surfaced that turned stomachs and lit headlines on fire. Sebastian Bach grinning backstage, wearing a t-shirt that reads something that I'm not going to repeat on YouTube because it would just smack me upside the head if I tried to. But nevertheless, it got people talking and freaking and all that good stuff. But Bach claimed that the shirt was a handoff from a fan thrown on without reading. The backstage gag gone wrong, but it didn't matter. The image was out. Damage was done. Accusations came swift and loud. And the backlash scorched both Bach and the band, dragging Skid Row into this real crazy storm that they weren't really ready to handle. And of course he would apologize, but the stain stuck. People just could not believe what they had seen. So it not just tainted the reputation, but it kind of marked it during that time. And even at their peak, the fractures were spreading. On stage, Sebastian Bach was the badass frontman. Off stage, the engine of Skid Row ran through Rachel Bolan and Snake Sabo. They wrote the songs, steered the vision, and slowly that balance started rotting. Creative differences turned into standoffs. Business decisions bred mistrust. Bach's off the rails, public antics. What once made him a lightning rod of charisma started feeling more like liabilities. And internally, it wasn't just a clash of styles, it was a cold war of egos, with Rachel and Dave tightening the reins and Sebastian bucking every time. The worst part, it didn't explode all at once. It just kind of started eroding really fast, show by show, meeting by meeting, till the camaraderie was gone, replaced by eye rolls and silence and a bunch of private side snickering. The frontman became the problem. The founders became the wall. And the whole machine started to seethe. By the mid-90s, the landscape had flipped pretty much overnight. Good old grunge again, hitting like a wrecking ball. Soundgarden, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains. No hairspray or solos, no leather pants, just flannel, distortion, and a deadpan stare that made the glam scene look like opposite day for shoegazers. And pretty much overnight, Skid Row, once kings of the neon battlefield, were suddenly relics. MTV flipped the switch, radio followed. The audience that once screamed for Youth Gone Wild were now headbanging to Smells Like Teen Spirit. It was like this whole musical cultural eviction notice thing happening, and for bands like Skid Row, the clock ran out fast. Subhuman Race hit in '95 and it landed with a thud. Great album, by the way, if anybody hasn't heard it. But Skid Row was trying to adapt. They're going even heavier, darker, even more complex. That record was snarling with frustration, sound of a band pushing against the tide. And it was their most musically ambitious album. And also, unfortunately, the most ignored. The numbers for the sales were just in a free fall. The band that once sold 5 million couldn't even crack the code of the new era. Grunge was ruling and Skid Row just couldn't shake the 80s shadow. No more arena slots, headlining turned into opening, and behind the scenes that pressure boiled. Sales dropped, patience thinned, and that fuse that had been smoldering for years was almost gone. And then came the offer. 1996. Kiss was reuniting. Not just touring, resurrecting. Full makeup. All the spectacle. The original lineup for the first time in nearly 20 years. Biggest rock event of the year. Maybe of the decade. Stadiums sold out before posters even hit the walls. And they wanted Skid Row. And for a band watching their spotlight dim, this was salvation wrapped in grease paint. A guaranteed shot at packed arenas. Massive press. A second win when they needed it the most. It wasn't even just exposure, it was pure friggin' redemption. Basically a lifeline. But what should have been a godsend actually became the final crack. Sebastian Bach was like, oh hell yeah, we'll take it. We're showing up with bells on, baby. Not in a meeting or a vote, just yes when that offer came in. I mean, come on, dear viewer. If you were offered that, what would you say? Tell me in the comments section. That Kiss Tour offer landed like gold dust and Bach grabbed it. But he didn't call Rachel and he didn't call Dave. No consensus, just one voice on behalf of the band that ran on shared control, at least in theory. And for Rachel and Dave, this wasn't ambition. It was full-on mutiny. To them, it wasn't just that Bach jumped the gun. It was what that jump said, that he saw himself as the band, that his voice outweighed theirs. Egos got bruised, that the faces who built Skid Row from day one were just background players in the Sebastian Bach show. And maybe some of that was in the dynamic. But viewers out there, you let me know if you think that Bach thought that he was doing what would have been best for the band by just saying, oh hell yeah, sign us up. But whatever tension had been simmering, the ego clashes, musical friction, frayed loyalties, this one lit the match. Trust was totally snapped. Lines were drawn, and from here there was no walking it back. Rachel Bolan didn't waste any time. Instead of bending, he doubled down. The Kiss offer, dead in the water. And while Skid Row was already cracking apart at the seams, Rachel had set up his escape hatch. Prunella Scales, both a side project and a pressure valve. The new band, new blood, some familiar faces from the road crew, less drama, more control. It gave Rachel something that Skid Row no longer could. Space to breathe, to create, maybe most importantly, space without Sebastian Bach. But whether it was a true passion project or just the perfect excuse, one thing was clear. Rachel Bolan wasn't clinging to the sinking ship. He had another ride ready and he was taking it. So he pulled the plug and pulled it hard. And he wasn't just canceling a gig, he was delivering a message. He was saying that Sebastian Bach's move had crossed the line and that Rachel wasn't about to let that happen. The official line? Get this, that Skid Row was too big to open, even for Kiss. And in 1996, that line didn't hold up. Once, sure, Skid Row headlined arenas, sold millions, dominated MTV. Those days were gone. The charts had shifted. Fans had moved. And the Kiss reunion wasn't just another tour, it was this rock spectacle of historic proportion. And Rachel Bolan's stance read less like strategy and more like just a wounded ego. A refusal to admit this new reality. Pride disguised as principle. And it was just all about that battle for control. It wasn't about logistics, it was about power. And the gloves were officially off. And granted, if Rachel Bolan thought Prunella Scales was more fulfilling or at least more peaceful, he wasn't wrong. Skid Row had definitely become a pressure cooker, and Bach had his hand glued to that dial. But it ended not with a meeting, but with a beep. Christmas, 1996. Years of tension, ego, unspoken fury finally snapped. No band vote or intervention, just a voice on an answering machine. And that's how Sebastian Bach found out. After everything, platinum albums, tours, they fired the frontman with a message. Cold, final, and detached. Not a convo, not even a fight, just silence on one end and a decision on the other. And for Bach, it was betrayal delivered like junk mail. And so Bach, of course, was done holding back. Still fuming over the full-blown Kiss tour, likely every grudge that piled up since the glory days, he picks up the phone and he dials Dave the Snake Sabo. No answer. So Bach let the machine have it. Full throttle, profanity-laced tirade. No filter or diplomacy. He owned it without flinching. Said, I called the guitar player and let him know what I thought. You fucking motherfucker. Scorched earth. Just let it all out on that answering machine. Every insult he'd been choking on. Uncorked in one volcanic voicemail. And when that message ended, so did the band. And then it got worse. That message, already scorched earth rant, didn't just hit Dave's ears. It hit his living room. On speaker, his whole family heard it. Every curse, insult, venom-soaked word blasting out into the open. What might have stayed a behind-the-scenes blow-up became this personal, public, humiliating thing. And of course, for Dave the Snake, that wasn't a phone call, it was a line crossed. Whatever bridge was left between them didn't just burn, it totally collapsed in front of his family. There'd be no reconciliation. It'd be totally unthinkable at that point. And even years later, Rachel and Dave didn't deny it. The problems were deep and long-standing, but it was that message, explosive, abusive, and broadcast to Dave's family that became the unignorable point of no return. So Bach's exit didn't just fracture the band, it actually triggered a full collapse. Soon after the fallout, Rob Affuso, the drummer, was also gone. Officially, he'd been out since '96, but details around his departure were murky. Maybe it was the fallout from all the chaos, or he saw the writing on the wall, or he was just done. Either way, it was over. The original five-piece, Bach, Bolan, Sabo, Hill, Affuso, the lineup that conquered the world with Youth Gone Wild and Slave to the Grind, was finished. What remained was a shell. So Rachel, Dave, and Scotty held the name, but that original version of Skid Row is now buried in the wreckage. And with their singer and drummer gone, Dave the Snake, Rachel, and Scotty Hill stood at a crossroads and chose not to fold. They could have buried the name, let Skid Row rest in its glory, but the brand still meant something, so instead of killing it off, they shelved it, put it on ice, letting the dust settle. In the meantime, they kept on playing. Same hands, different name, Ozone Monday, a side project. No platinum expectations, no Sebastian-shaped shadow hanging over every move, just music without the legacy dragging behind it. Skid Row was basically dormant at this point, and the clock was ticking on when and how they might bring it back. Well, in '99, Skid Row returned, 3 years after the implosion, but it wasn't some reunion act. No Bach or Affuso, no duct tape over the old wounds. So three guys rebuilt it from the ground up. Rob Hammersmith on drums, Johnny Solinger on vocals. Meanwhile, Bach charged forward solo. Still loud, still relentless. In 2006, he brought in Rick Sales, a heavyweight manager. According to Bach, that's when the last bridge burned. Claimed the band couldn't control sales, so they wanted a cheaper singer on a leash. Sabo shot back, said it was always equal footing. Behind Bach's solo grind, more chaos. Ralph Samtola called it haphazard. Metal Mike leftover money. Bach expected passion with paycheck, according to them. Nick Sterling supposedly wrote most of Kicking and Screaming and got no credit and quit before live taping. And meanwhile, Solinger held the Skid Row mic for 16 years. No explosions, but steady output. And then 2015, well, he was fired over the phone. Tony Harnell came next. Looked good on paper. Sabo said it never clicked. Gone by year's end. Then ZP Thiert. Then Eric Gronwall. Brief stability, then health took him out. Lizzie Hale stepped in for 4 shows, just a loner. All the while, Bach never stopped pushing for that reunion. Talks were flickering, fell apart, fights reignited, memoirs added gasoline, Rachel Bolin snapped. Fuso tried patching it, got iced. By 2022, Dave the Snake Sabo was just like, no reunion. Final. We're not doing it. Bach kept calling, though. March 2024, he pitched it again. Then April. Hopeful tone. By late April, door slammed shut. Sabo just kept going, no reunion. And that's where the trail cuts off. One band, two stories. While Bach keeps raising his voice, Skid Row just keeps fading into silence. But the real sting, the end of Sebastian Bach was the end of Skid Row's crown era. It was the collapse of a band that carved its name into the last roar of hair metal. What followed wasn't quiet, it was pure fallout, decades of it. Now no matter who grabs the mic, that shadow never moves. The band burned bright, burned fast, and that smoke just never cleared. To my subscribers, thank you. You frigging rock. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, give that subscribe button a call, leave a voicemail on its machine and tell it it's out of there, and then go ahead and call the like button, curse the living crap out of it on Christmas Day. Join the family. I want to thank you so much for watching.